Welcome to the Cyber Agony Aunt podcast series, brought to you by your very own cyber aunties, me, Amelia Hewitt.
And me, Rebecca Taylor. We're here to tackle the most pressing questions that arise throughout your cyber career with a selection of very special guests.
Think of us as your very own mentors, confidants, and cheerleaders, your agony aunts for surviving your career.
So hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyber Agony Aunts podcast.
I like that every time we do that, we have to think of something fractionally different to say. So for this episode, we have invited an influential cyber professional who is breaking down barriers and stigma in the world of romance fraud. You probably already know her. From fighting cybercrime to authorship to experiencing TV with their very own Netflix series, this person is a role model and an ally.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Well, thank you for the intro. I feel quite proud just by that. But yeah, I'm Cecilie Fjellhøy, and I got into all of the fraud world by becoming a victim of romance fraud back in 2018 now. And I went straight to the press, and that became the Tinder Swindler documentary that was created twice, actually. But it was the Netflix one that kind of spurred me into kind of what more can be done. And that's when I became a public speaker and co-founded LoveCon and, you know, becoming an author, writing a book with Pernilla from the Tinder Swindler that is kind of both the self-help book with experts' opinion and, of course, like helping people on with this Netflix series, LoveCon Revenge. So I'm doing a lot of different things and because I have a tech background. So I think for me, after some years, I could just see so many things that I was like, but why aren't we doing this from my user experience designer lens? And that's why I go into now advising companies as well on what can we do with both processes and tech to kind of improve and humanize it a bit more. So that's kind of fun.
Sure. I mean, I think I first came across you on another reality TV show and I was so fascinated. I don't think I even worked in cyber at the time and have sort of followed your journey since then and watched your...
Which one was it?
Celebs Go.
Yeah, my God. Yeah.
But you came across really well and I really liked your personality.
I was really boring compared to the others, but I was like, I'm not a celebrity, so I felt really out of place there because I was like, it's about celebrities dating normal people, you know, not celebrities. I was like, look, what are you talking about?
But it was great because I think you're quite honest. I think you're very honest and I really like that. And I sort of watching you, I was like, God, I want to be like that.
Oh, that's so nice.
That was quite a while ago now. Yeah. Anyway, back on track, other than my reality TV addiction. The name for today's podcast is The Heartbreak Economy. And we know love is magic in so many ways, but it can be exploited. And certainly people can be manipulated by threat actors to capture victims. And often that is for financial gain. And it's a very sad reality and something that you're a subject matter expert in from your own experiences. So I guess to start and to level set for listeners who might not be sort of too aware of what that is, could you please explain what romance fraud is and what that might look or feel like in reality, please?
Well, romance fraud is using an emotional connection like love or intimacy to exploit another person. And a lot of times it will be through financial gain, but it can be about control as well, or intimacy or sex. So there's many different ways. And what I think is so interesting and heartbreaking about particularly romance fraud is that it doesn't start with money. It doesn't start like this phishing or vishing, you know, that where it has to be something that you need to make a transaction. No, it's about that connection, that people find someone that they believe that they have a future with, or kind of been feeling like they finally their soulmate. It was something that a psychologist said that really like hit me, that she said, imagine that someone is finally telling the victim that they love them, that's the first time they've ever heard that, how goddamn awful, that then they meet a criminal on the other end. And I think that is maybe the most heartbreaking about romance fraud. It destroys families. The suicide rates here are incredibly high. Of course, we don't have specific numbers on it, but there was a study from Denmark, actually, that had a study with 14 different people and families of romance fraud. 2 of them had taken their own lives, and 1 had several suicide attempts. So if you think about it, like, yes, it's a small study, because it's not easy finding these victims, not easy finding families of people that we've lost to this horrible crime. And I think that is terrible, because it's trauma bonding, you know. It's a lot of times that it feels like a domestic abusive relationship, and the similarities between domestic abuse and romance fraud is staggering. Like, every single time you talk to a romance fraud victim, you're like, oh wow, it's exactly how it feels like, that you can't get out of it. You are continuing. You have the sunk cost fallacy, where, you know, you've given so much into a relationship, not even just time and energy and love, but when it comes to romance fraud, money as well. So your life is over if you realize it. And that's where I was, and that's why I feel so much with people who are then coming to me and talking about their stories, because, yeah, it's heartbreaking.
When you talk about it, I feel almost like a bubble of, I suppose, sadness come up, because I think the thing, having not personally been a victim but worked in cybercrime, I think the thing I find hardest about it is the actual heartbreak. Like you said, when you're talking to someone and they genuinely believed that they were loved, or that someone cared for them deeply, and they put their whole soul into that, and then to have that taken away. And that is far more difficult for an individual to overcome than potentially even the money side. Yeah. Money is hard, and money affects what you can do, where you can live. But it takes a long time to rebuild your trust and your ability to love.
But it's as well like the trust in yourself. A lot of people have been asking me, how could you trust again? How could you trust other people? But it's more like trusting your own judgment, and trusting that you are a good person and that you didn't deserve what happened to you. Because that's what a lot of, you know, victims who come forward keep being told, that you deserved what happened to you.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any other type of crime where people are laughing the same way about a very horrible and serious crime.
Yeah, and from a sort of cyber policy and governance side, it's one of the sort of few areas that we find very hard as professionals to support people on, because it's not like with almost the phishing stuff where we can help people to spot links or technical factors. It's an emotional thing, and actually when you're falling in love, it's very hard to actually separate reality from the version of reality you have, and that's human instinct. And so I think that's the tricky element, is often when we don't know what to do, we make it the problem of the victim, and it's certainly not their fault. And I think that's something as an industry we need to be better at, is helping people, particularly vulnerable people, because we know that, you know, they are disproportionately impacted by crimes like this, to sort of realise those signs and make it more publicly aware, which I think is a lot of the work that you're doing at the moment.
But look at vulnerability with a different lens too, because I was vulnerable when I was targeted, because I just moved to a new city and didn't have friends and family. I told a different country as well. Yeah. So I think like a lot of times vulnerability can be situational. Like you can have lost your job, you could have lost your husband or wife much sooner than in your 70s. But I totally agree with you. Like my biggest heartbreaks are the elderly. Yeah. And I've had several people, because sometimes we always say, well, it happens to everyone, it happens to young people. But sometimes like we sometimes have the time to rebuild. And it's heartbreaking for me when you talk to these who are in their 70s and 80s, and they come and they've lost everything. And not like that, but they don't have the same time to kind of rebuild. And if it is their retirement funds, they are, you know, they can't really work to make more money either. So it's just like, it's a
very tough topic.
Yeah.
But again, I know we joke about me being moderately fangirly as a person, but I hope you do realise the difference you're making just by being a voice and an advocate in a really challenging space. You are changing people's lives by just being exactly who you are.
Thank you.
So thank you for your work, and thank you for trying to make a difference.
Thank you. Like it's been such a journey since 2018, and I see the change that is happening, which is really, really nice. And especially being welcomed by kind of the cybercrime community and cybersecurity community, and see that you have a voice there as well. I think just being listened and heard, that people with lived experience have expertise as well, and they can be a great voice. It's been really nice. So thank you for the invite as well.
Yeah, no, of course.
Our pleasure.
So with this particular series, we've been focusing a lot on resiliency. And so with that in mind, we, as I've said, think it's very, very inspirational how you've been able to turn your own lived experience as obviously a victim of crime, if you're comfortable for us to say that, into a learning opportunity and to support those around you. But with that in mind, what has life been like for you personally since some have even been publicly known as a victim to the Tinder swindler? What steps have you taken both practically and obviously emotionally? Because it is hard to keep going and not let what happened define you.
Yeah. That's sometimes the issue when you go public. It does really define you.
Yeah.
And I must really say very quickly that I know there's always discussions about it. Are you a victim? Are you a survivor? For me, it's been very important to be labeled as a victim of a crime, because a lot of romance fraud victims are not being viewed as victims. They're being viewed as complicit. Like, well, you did it. So that's why you're not a victim of a crime, and this is a civil matter, and they're just being put away or just... So that is just for me. Of course, you go from victimhood into a survivor. That's one thing. But I think it's so, for me personally, super important that you have been a victim of a serious crime. And that is what sometimes when people come to me, that you are telling them that you were a victim of a crime. And that is okay. So that is just one thing. But yeah, I know, but it's everyone has a difference of opinion there. But for me personally, it has been such a long journey. And what I would have wished for when you are a victim of a crime, it could have stopped for me in May 2018, and you could have started that proper healing process. But because fraud was viewed, let's say it like that, with the UK police, you just really have to fight. And it was a point in 2019 where the Met Police turned on me and I became a suspect in my own case, and I had 4 banks in Norway taking me to court. That's when you're like, wow, you really have to stand up and be very strong in your conviction. So from a personal angle, to be able to still stand strong in my convictions was to find people who were of the same opinion as me. Like, okay, is it right that we are making victims suspects? Is it okay that we take them to court and re-traumatize them to that extent? No. So kind of consumer affair groups, academics, both in Norway and here in the UK, Dr. Elizabeth Carter. I have Professor Marte Kjørberg over in Norway. When I got a hold of these academic communities, I was like, oh, wow, so I'm not weird thinking that this is a bit upside down, right?
Yeah.
So for me personally, that knowledge has been so empowering for me, like being able to read a lot of the academic papers, reading myself of what happened to me, like understanding why I acted the way I acted, why I wasn't myself, was kind of why I became the strong and resilient person I am. As well, when everything is crumbling around you as a romance fraud victim, you don't have your future anymore. You don't have the person who loved you and they never loved you. I had to sell my flat. I had to file for bankruptcy. So everything is just crumbling, I had to sell my flat. Everything is destroyed. What do you have? I was so lucky that I had my health. Not everyone has that either, but I was like, okay, of course. So what can I do? So I started just working out. I got like a PT because I was like, what I can control is my own body now. Like that's all I have left. I know it's sad to say, but that's what I was feeling. So I was like, I have to strengthen myself because I was just feeling like I need to at least have a strong body and strong mind. And I think as well, a therapy.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, talking therapy. I believe that I should have had trauma therapy as well because I had signs of PTSD. But for me, just being able to have a sounding board with someone, because the trauma sits in the body. So I'm still very skittish. I can see that is the main thing, which I can see that I'm still very heightened in because for me, for example, silence is danger. Before I became a suspect, it was so quiet from the police and I didn't understand at the time. And then boom, that was happening, So I'm very scared of these things still to this day. that what makes me sad for romance fraud victims is like, I think we all can handle an abusive relationship. We can all handle that crime is happening. Yeah, it's horrible, but we know that that might happen. You might have a robbery. But then when you turn to get help, there's no help. And you become the instigator. People tell you that it's your fault. That is traumatizing. And that is why so many, like the victims who are coming and the messages I'm receiving, is almost like that's what they're struggling with most, is the aftermath.
Yeah.
Because not only do you have to handle the crime that happened to you, sometimes over several years, this is a long game for these fraudsters, but then you have to fight now both financial institutions and police at the same time. So that is maybe my thing, my personal, was like, I was just so complete in shock that happened. I came from a very naive standpoint, like it needs to be worked out, right? I like, no, but it didn't. And even though I went public, nothing changed and nothing helped by going public either.
No, and I find that interesting because if someone came to you and said, I've been mugged, you wouldn't go, but what did you do in that situation? And so I just think it's mad that we can say to people who are victims of serious crime, what role did you play in it? And it's almost like, hindsight is obvious. And I'm sure you now, with the understanding of what you know about yourself then, can say, oh, I understand why I did that. But asking people that are traumatized to rationalize their own behavior in often quite public settings or in courts or as part of legal proceedings is very unreasonable, I think.
And but as I said, hindsight that is why when I was sitting in court and was questioned with all the, choices that I had made, I was like, of course I see it now. We have all the facts at that point in time. Trust and love is very powerful. And what Simon did, he was mixing love and fear. For my own life as well. And I was feeling it on my body. I met him in person and I felt it. But that was so interesting to me. Like when I couldn't even get compassion from the lawyers, from the financial institutions, what does the online ones have to deal with then? You know what I mean? When I, who was there in person with him, felt it, they were like, well, you should have realized. When I got that, so I always say, like, when in the age of AI, when now everyone is saying, we're not going to be able to know what's real. And now and I'm sitting here, victims will always get blamed. They will always come, the financial institution will always come and say, well, you should have realized that was AI, We have this amazing software that's not available to you, but we can see that was an AI-made image. Yeah. And we will still get that, I promise you. That's why it irritates me a bit, because now they're like, now we won't know. We got the blame still, even though we met the guy in person and saw the wealth. We got told, you shouldn't have believed that. So what?
Like you don't and that's the thing, when you like someone or love someone, you don't question, your brain doesn't go there because you don't want to think that someone you hold in such high regard would or could do that to you. And I know, Rebecca, you'll have an interesting follow-up on this, but there's a really good book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is about how trauma manifests in the body over a period of time. And there's another fantastic one called It Didn't Start With You that talks about generational body trauma and that sort of thing. So if you're interested in that's resources that I would really recommend.
I think the only thing I have to really say is that it makes sense why victims find it so hard to come forward, particularly of these types of crimes where it does involve particularly love and trust. And I find it hard to hear your story, but even harder to know that there are more and more people falling victims to these kinds of crimes that are potentially sitting with it silently because they don't feel they can turn to their version of law enforcement, or they don't feel they can tell a family member or friend because of this. It almost feels like a sense of, listening to what you're saying, almost like a sense of shame in some respects is what people maybe are pushing out there as you come forward or try to say what happened or how you feel. Yeah. But I do as well love that you spoke to therapy as someone that has done therapy, and I'm proud that I did therapy because I needed it and I needed that help. I think it's a very clear message, if we're talking about you as a victim of crime or not, there are avenues out there that can support you if you are dealing with a trauma or if there are mental health things going on. So make sure you are talking in a way that you feel safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was very lucky because when I went to the UK police, they took it seriously first. So the woman I was speaking to who took in my report, she was really kind and she put it into the domestic abuse. And so I got a call from victim support back and that was so amazing. They were, I think that is such a great charity. I understand that they do all crimes, so it's difficult to have that specialized, but being able to just have that phone call with them where they ask, are you fearful? You know, does he have access? Does he know where you live?
Yeah.
Do you need this? And kind of where they were signposting me to other charities. That was like the listening place. That was the first charity I went to just because that was the quickest one. It's an amazing charity for people with suicidal ideation or thoughts. And then I went into Mind, the mental health. And it's just like, I was just so floored and appreciative that, oh my God, there's a lot of charities out there that are there. But so I felt lucky because I know not everyone gets that phone call either.
Yeah. But it's even just to hear you say you felt lucky, it's like that's the bare minimum we should be doing to support victims.
I know, but it's like I was just because I knew that since she put it into domestic abuse, that's why they cared.
Yeah.
To be frank with you guys, you know, like if it would be fraud,
they wouldn't
just puts it into a financial crime bucket and it's not anything human about that, right? So I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
And we know it's like therapy can be really inaccessible because it can be expensive. And so you think, well, if you've been a victim of serious financial crime that has taken a lot of money from you, are you necessarily in a position to afford those resources? And people don't think about that though, because you just think like, well, you know, they'll have therapy, they'll be fine. It's actually like that work isn't done in 6 sessions. That takes a long time to process. And
yeah, I think that's the thing as well about crime, and if we relate it to romance fraud in particular, is that people think it's for a given period. I think when you often maybe view it in public reporting or from, again, if I put the cybercrime hat on, it looks like it's a story for a specific set of time, but actually the consequences, the impacts, the mental health side can go on for far longer, and that's why there needs to be that robust support, that obvious ways to talk and to see you through to the other side of it. Because, there does need to be support. And the charities that are doing that need to also be supported and advocated for as well.
Yeah. And for example, over in the US, I recently did some research together with them. And it's called Give an Hour. And they have an amazing, both mental health services for financial fraud victims, where it's both like clinicians that come in and look at, how has this affected you? But they have peer support groups over there as well. So I was like, I didn't even know that it existed over in the US. With Love Said, we do have a peer support group each Sunday that Anna is running, but kind of like where else? That's why I was so happy to hear, because we're in different time zones. But so there are stuff out there, but I didn't even know about it before So it's more about like, how can we get more of the word out that these things exist?
The signposting.
Yeah, signposting,
Yeah. Okay, so sort of moving on slightly to a question that interestingly came up as part of the process of us writing our second book, but is actually something we've both been asked by listeners and also mentees, is I work with victims of crime, and every time I see them hurting, it breaks my heart. How can I be supportive and empathetic without it feeding too much into who I am and breaking my heart too? Yeah,
as we were talking about this, because after I went public, and you have this influx of these, stories coming to your inbox, or people, talking to you directly as well after a talk. People come up to me, and it's just heartbreaking. And I think it's so important to understand that empathy doesn't have to eat you up, You can still have compassion without taking on the responsibility of fixing the entire thing. And sometimes I have wanted to do that. You feel like if I go into this conversation, I want to fix this. I want to use all my resources so you can get that help. But there's just too many stories sometimes to be able to do that. But so for me, it's been so important that sometimes that listening ear is much more important than the end game. Like to have that initial conversation. That's what I've seen has been sometimes so healing for people, that they are listening to someone. And it's so strong what peer support is. For me, I love it, but I have seen how much it takes of me. So I really recognize myself in that. I thought that I was much stronger, but I think it's because I'm still in it. Like I'm still bankrupt. I still, can feel the consequences to this day. It's difficult to close the door when you're being reminded every single day. So, and my criminal is still out there. So I have that. So I'm still in this little victim space still. So I really understand. But how I'm trying to protect myself is like, okay, it's not that I need to take on the responsibility for their entire case, like that the police needs to catch this criminal or that they're going to get their money back. Because I think that is the hardest part for me, is that when they come and they say, I need this money back, like my children, I need this. And that you're not going to get your money back. And having to be that person who makes them realize that can be really, really tough. But it needs to be said. But yeah, I just don't have, sometimes I feel like people are looking for me for answers. And I was like, I don't even have the answers on how to not be affected. I think that comes from being an empathetic person. And that's great. But I think you can't pour into someone if your glass is half full, It's impossible. You need to be strong enough to be able to help. So if you feel that, take a step back and kind of pour into your own cup before you help others as well. If not, to be burned out over this is not worth it.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a really powerful answer. And it's definitely food for thought. I think it can, like you said, it can be really hard when you're talking to someone and they've had an awful time or a horrible experience. And I think it just goes to show what a beautiful person you are, that you want to use your word, try to fix and try to support them on that level. But there is something to be said by just being a listening ear. We just spoke about therapy, right?
Yeah.
There is something to be said for just validating and acknowledging that person. Because up until that point, they may have not been acknowledged for what has happened.
But that is what makes me a bit, sometimes I've used a lot of anger, because you can become very angry. And I don't want to be bitter, but it makes me angry when you then get emails. You're my only hope.
Yeah.
You're my last and only hope, Cecilie. Why? Why does these people feel that the only person is because they watched maybe LoveCon Revenge?
Yeah.
And Cecilie is helping catch fraudsters now.
Yeah.
So she's my only hope. Why is that? Why are these people feeling that there are no help? Like the police doesn't know enough about crypto, so they say we can't help you when we know they can do more than what they're doing today. And I think that is sometimes what upsets me, that sometimes if the police were better trained, so I don't blame the police officers on the ground, but we know that a lot of times they don't have the proper knowledge to be able to even help in some of these cases. They just said, we can't get to it. And it was like,
Yeah.
I think perhaps the thing there is that people forget that whilst you're doing incredible work, this is probably not where you saw your life going at all. And it's probably not, you didn't want for that line of work. And so I guess there is the element of people that are also in the situation having to remember, just because your story is the one that has made big headlines, that doesn't make you the default fixer of all of this problem. And so I can imagine that there is very valid frustration there at the same time of the fact that, there is only so much you can do as one person, for sure.
And for example, that all the charities in the world are trying their best, to help out.
Yeah.
But there are some more powerful entities that could do more.
For sure.
So that is it should be something that is being, that everyone is taking a bit piece of that responsibility to actually do proper victim support. Like I've been talking to Bumble, who is, I feel like, at least from a dating app perspective, are doing, more in the support space.
Yeah.
Should dating apps, for example, provide proper support groups, therapy, if you met your criminal on their platforms? Yes, I say, they should have that societal angle from their business perspective to provide that. So that is where I'm looking at. It would be nice to actually have a bit more signposting, to other, where did you meet? Well, they have this.
I think that's a fabulous angle on it, actually, to be able to go back to the core of where did those relationships form.
Yeah.
We touched on it briefly earlier that victims of cybercrime, it's often the financial implications and damage which can cause impacts long after. You spoke obviously briefly about the bankruptcy piece in your story. Can you talk to us a little bit about the financial implications and about particularly how organisations can really help individuals best recover from financial crime?
Yeah, from the financial angle, that's what I mean. There's so many different ways people are losing their money, not losing, or they're being targeted and their money is being stolen. Trying to use the right language here at times is so easy to, but it's like they are being stolen, the money.
Yeah.
And both from where I saw over in the US, the amount of 401ks, the retirement funds that they can just take out. I was shocked about how easy that was. And if you can imagine the implications there, I took up a lot of high consumer debt loans with very high interest. And that's what a lot of people are doing, or taking up credit cards. There's so many different methods. But as we can see just over here in the UK with the reimbursement and the law that has come into place, it has so much to do with the method if you can get reimbursements. So if you're using credit cards, that's a lot more difficult than if there was a bank transfer, which is like, why should it be that if the fraudsters are targeting you for one thing, it's easier to get reimbursements than if they were, smart enough for whatever reason to use a credit card? That is like, so the financial implications, I think, is just so sad, depended on even just that. And for me, and for a lot of people, having to sell your home. I was speaking to one after a talk where her mom had been, it was some decades ago, but their mom had been defrauded and they had to sell their house and move into a smaller flat. So these are kind of, and as I say, a bankruptcy is very horrible. And everyone says it with so ease to me. Just file for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And I think
As
it's so weird.
Solution.
It's almost like, yeah, great. And it saved me. I was so happy. I think bankruptcy is an amazing thing that we can do to have protection, because I needed to be protected from the debt collectors of these financial institutions. And the issue as well with debt collectors and financial institutions is that when your loan is sold to a debt collector, when you then try to say, well, should you have given me this loan in the first place? They don't care anymore. So the original lender doesn't own the loan, the debt anymore. So you are complaining to someone that really doesn't care how you got the loan. So that is another. I have been so into how easy it was for me and for a lot of people to get loans without proper checks and care. Identity theft. There's many ways that they are. So in that sense, it's. And as I say, I saw that Martin Lewis is setting up a new charity where mental health and money. So I actually reached out to them because for me, mental health and money issues, the main reason why I'm still so stressed is because of money, and not understanding how privileged and lucky I was when I didn't have money problems. And suddenly you're in the situation where you don't know where to turn and no one is actually there to help you with any money issues. And that's so important for financial institutions to have a very good think about. If you have someone who's been a victim of, for example, romance fraud or investment fraud, their trauma is bound up to money.
Yeah.
So I would love for them to think as well, how can we protect and help our customers after the fraud as well? Yeah. How can we make them feel safe with money and money decisions? It's happened. They've lost it. And I feel like sometimes they just take their hands off. And I'm like, well, you're still there. You still have customer care here. How can you be better at understanding that? So when bills are still there, your mortgage, it might still be there. Bills are, you need to pay, you need to handle money. Yeah. So how can you ensure that they, have a life after fraud? Because there is one. Yeah. So that is kind of where I see, and how organizations can help. Well, I think that is hugely important to be able that you have maybe a third party that can look over. Because if I would have known that it would have ended up in both, court rounds and bankruptcy, I would have made many different choices straight after the fraud. But I didn't have any help. There was no third party to help me from that financial aspect, to be frank or real with me. You know, Cecilia, you have over £200,000 of debts and it's loans. This is what's going to happen most likely. I didn't have that. So I would love for organizations to maybe have some money experts or some financial experts as well to be able to help people.
It's almost that need, particularly if you, from a financial institution perspective, it's that human touch again of noticing that someone is behaving unusually with their money.
Yeah.
Those persistent transactions, large volume transactions. I wish someone had just seen you and done something at that point in time, because it's almost, you just needed a human to spot it, to stop it, to potentially, I mean, I can't predict what would have happened, but maybe changed some of the pathway that you ended up down. I don't know.
It would have. I have taken the main bank to, we have a financial conduct authority in Norway.
Yeah.
So I've taken them there and I have made a formal complaint, but because they didn't want to talk to me. They just closed the door and I said, well, I'm a public figure now. And when I'm on stages around the world, that's the question you're asking. Everyone is asking. But you said that you have great fraud protection and detection. And I was like, well, from I just don't see that. So I just wanted to know why. So that's why I took them. And they refuse. And it's so interesting with financial institutions. There are many great ones over here in the UK that are doing great work, I'm not saying. But they were writing in their answers to my claim that I said you should have stopped this, that since I didn't tell them that I was being defrauded, they didn't know.
It's again,
and I'm like,
thing, isn't it?
It's so like, and I think it's important that people know how these banks sometimes are answering and how they are really. And what I always say, I was doing an event a couple of days ago, and what I was saying to the people who were listening to me that were not in the fraud community, and I was like, I need you guys with me to understand the implications that the money is just, even though you don't care if I lost my money, these money are going to criminals.
Yeah.
So as a society, we should all care. I don't you just lost your money, like poor you or whoever you speak to. And I was like, well, we don't want this to end up in the wrong person's hands. And they are.
It's feeding into crime.
Yeah. And so that's why I mean, like to change this stigma or this narrative about that this crime doesn't affect you needs to change.
Yeah, hugely. And I think the loan thing is very interesting because you can take out tens of thousands of pounds worth of loans and the only thing you might be asked is a tick box on has anyone coerced you or are you doing this for anyone else? You click no, you might have a short phone call with them to validate where to transfer to. They let you take out a loan. You might have never needed a loan before. And I think also a lot of the issue with technology being integrated into this process is a lot of decisions on credit are made by machines, not humans. So you might have good credit because you've never taken out a loan before. We're going to let you take out £100,000. No one is going to ask you what that might be for because, you know, maybe it's impolite to do that or it's unprofessional to do that. And actually, I think there are so many people who could be helped by some human intervention because you don't know that isn't the first time anyone has actually spoken to them about that relationship and that situation. And I know, Rebecca, you've hosted talks on online safety and you had someone share their experience publicly for the first time because it was an opportunity to speak to another human being. Because I imagine as part of being a victim and with the coercion, it's probably quite isolating for you. You probably aren't going to say to your friends, oh, well, he asked me to do this. And, you know, so I think that part is interesting. And I think moving on, then in terms of victim perception, and I think we've spoken quite a lot about that, is I think with the work that you're doing, the perception around who a victim can be is certainly changed because, as we say, we often think, oh, well, it only happens to older people. And so probably two questions there is like, what was the reaction, I guess, initially for you from the media and publicly? And I guess, do you think that your role in the industry now is changing that perception of who that could be?
Yeah, I think why the Tinder Swindler became such a success was that it was like finally like just young women who had their life together, not like that, but like had a career and was doing well. You know, you're coming forward here with quite of an incredible story. So yes, like for me, like when I went public and when people came back to me and when people were writing to me, is everyone. I was holding a talk over in Frankfurt for CIOs and CISOs, and I got a LinkedIn message from a man, and if you would see his LinkedIn profile, you would never have thought that he would become a victim. But he said, I got tears in my eyes sitting there because, you know, the same thing happened to me. So it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
And coming public, we need stories, and we need more male stories because it happens to men as well. It is a 50-50 crime. And it breaks my heart, the amount of men that might sit in silence with this because they don't have the same type of support system. I think that's maybe the one thing. I think as well, sometimes women, we have a bit more like, we need to protect others. We feel the need, you know, I want to protect my fellow women, you know, that might be ending up in the same issue. But that has been a huge struggle getting men to come forward. And I have to say, it is changing. And I think the Tinder Swindler started it. There's become so many more, you know, fraud shows and fraud documentaries where people, it was incredible to see the amounts of people, different people, you know, who were just, how can I out my fraudster? Like the police aren't doing anything. And I want this to be a deterrent for criminals they might be thinking, police aren't going to do anything, can't even catch Simon Levive, so like, I'm free. I want them to think that they might end up on Netflix, you know? I want them to have that feeling, okay, should I do this? Should I maybe take a step back? And the feeling, so sorry, now I got over a little bit, but like, for me, as I said, which has, like, a fraud victim can be anyone. But what I always say is that to become a target of this, you have to be a good-hearted person. You have to have, sorry to say, shit together, you know? You have to be empathetic, you have to be giving, you have to be loving, you have to be kind. And these are the people we want in our lives as friends. So that is how I want people to look at it and look at, okay, maybe you are thinking you might not be a victim, but what about your friends and family? What about your loved ones? And if you start thinking about like that the phone call I'm going to do, or I want to do something to help think about in that aspect.
I think that's where you're saying that the potential victims are the kind, the loving, the empathetic, the good people who we want. I think that's a really important message in itself. It's not necessarily a fragile, delicate, super vulnerable person that's hidden. It could be, but actually that's the whole point. It could be anybody. You just have to be open.
But sometimes I feel like when people say, you were so naive, you know, or you were gullible. Is that a crime? Is that a crime? I'm just trying. It's so funny to me when people start doing that. It's not a crime. You haven't done anything wrong by being naive. It might be a reason. Yes, I come from a very naive country. We trust government. We trust banks. I was so grateful when I got my mortgage, you know. Stupid. Like, why should I be grateful for something that they make money off of me? But do you understand? Yeah. So I'm saying, yes, I might have been naive when I met him. It doesn't make it okay for him to defraud me.
No, and I think that's the point, is that it's really strange to, you know, it's a similar thing we see in other crimes, and it's the whole, you know, what part did you play? And it's like, well, no part of that says, what did they do to me? It all just says, like, what did I do as a part of that? And like, as I said, when you're in the moment, your cognitive reasoning doesn't question that. And we know that because that's how human psychology works, and that's how hormones work. And our brains are very good at seeing things through the lens in which, you know, the situation we're in, not in hindsight. And I think that a lot because we do the same thing to people that fall sort of victim to phishing quite a lot. It's like, well, you should have known better. And it's like, well, there is so much to think about in the modern age. Like, well, you leave the house, okay, make sure I've got everything, make sure that this can't happen to me and that can't happen to me. We can't be on all the time. And there are also times where we are situationally vulnerable, or we're more tired, or we're not as on it. And, you know, we don't punish people for getting into accidents. So why do we feel that we can punish them for being victims of crime? It's just so strange.
And us who work in the industry, and sometimes I as well, why don't you know about this? But of course not. We're in the industry. We know about different tools that exist. We breathe it. When we wake up, we go on LinkedIn and we see it. an everyday person doesn't.
Yeah.
The amount of people who doesn't know about that you can do a reverse image search, just a very simple one, is just staggering to me.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
But I've been in the tech world and everything. But that's why, and young people as well, like, oh, you can do that? I was like, yes, you can.
Yeah.
So if people don't know about it, how can they protect themselves? Like, we want to empower people. That's what I would love for more people to do, to understand that we're going into a different age, where we don't know what's going to be real and what isn't.
Yeah.
And of course, if the government and the tech companies are not there to protect us, we need to kind of armor ourselves with the tools.
And I think that's where, particularly with the emergence, like you said earlier, of more programs around fraud, romance fraud, cyber crimes, it's bringing those topics to the mainstream. Mm-hmm. And that is what's going to make the difference in the everyday person, because it'll just be a little nugget or something they remember. And that is what will change the course for a lot of potential victims, because they'll remember that little gem that they heard in their favourite programme or told to them by Martin Lewis about mortgages.
Yes,
and that will equip them for the future.
Yeah. Well, it's, we on the last season had on Jake Moore, who speaks a lot on the news, and he was recently on Scam Interceptors, I think, talking about financial crime and cybercrime. And I know for a fact, for example, my grandmother might not have remembered absolutely everything, but he's the nice man off the telly. Like, and so you remember and you associate some of those bits of information because you've seen someone who is recognizable, who comes across relatable, and that's the thing. I think the cyber industry sometimes has a bad habit of like looking down our noses at people and being like, well, you should know how to do that. And actually that's not how to teach people at all.
No.
But I think so many more countries should look to the UK, because I never have been in a country where you have more fraud and scam shows. It's so interesting.
We do crime here.
Yeah, Rip Off Britain, Scam Interceptors. I feel like, just the morning breakfast shows. I was on BBC this morning back in November where I was like, we're just going to talk about romance fraud. Huh? Like, it doesn't happen in my home country of Norway. I just don't think it's that is part of the education of the public that the BBC is doing, when they have the Fraud Awareness Week. I was like, wow. Or around Valentine, we get an influx. Do you have a victim? Do you have a victim? That's another thing. But like around Valentine, then romance fraud is coming up. Like, and I'm just so grateful of that we are in a country. We can say a lot about it, we can complain, but I like to bring up some of the good work that is being done as well. And we are spearheading compared, because I travel around the world and I was like, we're the only country that has reimbursement, for example.
That's so fascinating.
It's only country in the world.
Yeah. Between my scam programs, my ambulance programs, my police programs, and my Bondi Beach one. I love that Bondi Beach program. I'm a very busy woman on TV. Anyway, to lead us into the last question, V, and this is actually coming from a listener. So they have said, I am worried about my mum. She's been talking to a man online and he's asked her a few times to send money. How can I get her to best see the reality of the situation and that he might not be the man she's dreaming of? I don't want to hurt her feelings, make her feel like she isn't loved, or damage her confidence in making decisions online. What would you recommend?
Here it's so difficult, because I think family can be hugely important to help someone come out from it, because isolation is what these people are thriving on. But it depends kind of how far they've come and how much money they sent, how far and deep it is, and what she's tried already. I think compassion is super important here. I think finding out the reality, finding, as I said, tools, if she sent images to show that this individual is maybe not who they say they are, that it is made with AI, maybe show where she sent the money that is not what she thought it was, if we can follow the trail of the money to kind of show that, okay, you thought you were sending it to him, there was something else, this is sketchy, or this company is sketchy. So I think those are the practical steps, but as well, like the very trauma-informed language here is super important when to step into that and sit right next to them, both physically, but as well like that you're with them instead of right across, that you are kind of, why did you do that? Yeah. And you are being scammed. We know that is not working. No one likes to be told what to do, or that the person that they love are not who they said they were. Yeah. So that's why I'm always like really understand it comes from a great and a good place. You just want to tell them you are being scammed, I like to use kind of why questions, get them to kind of explain. You know, we use the why questions to find out if an idea is good, to kind of dig deeper, you know, because if you can't explain it, and a lot of times they won't be able to explain it, they will stop. And I always try to say as well, is that nugget of doubt that you need to, so it's maybe not one conversation you'll have with was it your mom? Sorry.
Person's mom.
Yeah. Maybe it's not one conversation with your mom. You might just say something, let her sit with it by herself, because it's so difficult to admit this. So maybe let her kind of give her some ways to read up, see other stories, watch the Tinder Swindler, watch LoveCon Revenge, you know, but it actually helps for a lot of people. So I think a lot of times it's when you sit with it, and that's when you dare to realize it yourself. And that's what's the tricky part about it, because it's heartbreaking. Because I've had stories where it was another woman who her dad thinks he was in a relationship with Mila Kunis, and he just said to his daughter that, I'm an old man, let me just believe. Oh, you know what I mean? It's so, but I think that is like some parts, both practical, but as well like language, and kind of not expect one conversation and, you know, be so stressed about that she needs to realize this now. That is how I see it. And talk to her financial institution as well. I think send a warning into them that you are concerned with your mom and kind of the transactions she's been doing. I know they can't do, but I think it's good to have it on record that you have called in.
For sure. And there's a lot of added complexity around this, and we see it a lot in other cybercrime spaces, where it's often not feasible to just go, quote unquote, cold turkey, because that person might have sensitive imagery about you, or they may know things about you and they might blackmail you. And so understanding that fear that comes with that, I think, is really integral. And that expectation that whilst, yes, the best thing you can probably do for them is turn their phone off and remove that contact, that is not constructive in the majority of cases of people that are going through this, because there is an element of exploitation where you have to have some emotional, financial buy-in to that relationship for them to exploit that.
I think exactly like you said as well, it's about sitting with them, being present with them. It isn't about going, what are you doing? How can you not see that this horrible person? Yeah. Because that's not going to resonate. That's not
their reality.
But if anything, it'll push them further away, and they'll tell you less, and they'll do more secretly.
As I said, like, this was more towards financial institutions when I'm trying, you know, because the fraud operator, you know, think about the trust that the criminal has built with this person, and you're just a random person from a bank calling. Why should they trust you more than the other? It's just to have that sense. And the same there, like a love there is different than, you know, a child. And they are really good at thinking no one else understands us and the us against them situation as well. Understand that they've already set them up for that they will question this. So you're doing exactly what the criminal has already told the victim, that this will happen. So it's tricky, but it is possible. But you just need, the family can be an incredible source. They just need to handle it the right way.
Sure. I can't believe we're at the end of the episode nearly. And we do have just a small question to end on. So 2025 was a very big year for you. Can you give us any insights into what 2026 is looking like? And is there anything our lovely listeners can be looking out for?
Ooh, there might be something in the future that I can't say. But I think I just want to continue kind of more of the work in the tech space, helping, you know, financial institutions with their processes, continue speaking out. And we'll just have to see. But I think it's going to be an interesting year.
Oh, it's going to be a good year.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see what you get up to. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know that this is going to be so impactful for so many people listening.
Agreed, absolutely. It's been an honour to have you. So thank you for talking so openly as well.
Well, thank you for having me.
If you have any other questions relating to any of the topics we've covered in this podcast, pop them over to us at cyberagonyauntz@gmail.com, and we will do our best to reply there, or maybe even cover it in a future podcast. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others or post about it on social media using the hashtag cyberagonyaunt.
As always, a huge thank you to our guests, to Matinee Multilingual, and to you, our listeners. Keep smiling, keep shining, and we'll see you next time on the Cyber Agony Aunts podcast.